Hey there besties! Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're continuing our recap of the manhwa, Betrayal of Dignity. If you're new to this series, check the description below for links to previous episodes. Lastly, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy the video. It really helps our channel grow. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. As Chloe stood in the dimly lit room, unease settled over her. The man before her held Sophie tightly, his hand clamped over her mouth. "Answer me. Is Damien here?" he demanded. Chloe's mind raced. Did he know Damien's true identity? He didn't seem like an ordinary thief. What should she do? Her fingers curled into a tight fist. From downstairs, Damien's voice called out, shaking her from her thoughts. "Chloe, are you still upstairs?" Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Answer like nothing's wrong," the man ordered. His grip on Sophie tightened, making her eyes well with tears. She whimpered against his palm. Chloe swallowed hard. "Yes, I'm still here," she called back, keeping her voice steady. "Adele is up here too. She's just upset that I had to leave so suddenly." The man smirked at her cooperation. "Oh, really? Well, I'm glad you found her at least," Damien replied, his footsteps approaching the door. Chloe shut her eyes briefly. "Please, Damien, don't come in." The door creaked open. A sudden gunshot rang out. Chloe flinched as the man staggered back, his grip on Sophie loosening. Damien stood firm, Mr. Ricardo's shotgun smoking from the fired round. Sophie stumbled into Chloe's arms, trembling. Miss Claire." Chloe knelt beside her, holding her close. "It's okay, Sophie. You're safe now." Damien's gaze remained sharp as he turned to Chloe. "It's not safe here. Can you stand?" She nodded, though her mind remained clouded with unease. "That man, he knew who you were. Damien, what is this about?" Damien exhaled, his expression grim. "Johannes is eager to see me." Chloe's stomach tightened. "Johannes." "Take Sophie back home," Damien instructed. "But..." He bent down, picking up the discarded firearm. His jaw tensed. There was only one bullet. Chloe hesitated. "What about you?" His gaze flicked toward the hallway. "If there are more, they'll be coming after hearing the gunshot. I'll deal with them." Her hands clenched at her sides as he stepped toward her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Go. Make sure Sophie gets home safely." "Will you be able to ride the horse?" he asked. "Yes, but..." She looked unsure. Sophie tugged at Chloe's dress. "I know a shortcut." Damien crouched beside her, offering a reassuring smile. "You're very brave, Sophie. I trust you." She nodded determinedly, gripping Chloe's hand tightly. Damien straightened. "We can't waste time. Chloe, go now." A sudden, cruel laugh echoed from the doorway. "Damien, are you in here?" Damien tensed. "They're here." He pushed open a wardrobe door. "Hide in here. Stay inside until I say it's safe." Chloe's eyes widened. "But, Damien, you can't face them alone. You can't even use the gun anymore." Sophie whimpered, burying her face into Chloe's side. Damien knelt again, his voice calm but firm. "Sophie, we're playing hide-and-seek now. No matter what, stay quiet." Chloe's throat tightened. "You expect me to sit here while you get hurt?" He took her hands, squeezing gently. "Johannes won't finish me off here. He enjoys the game. Think about what happens next." Her breath hitched. "Damien." His eyes softened. "You're brave, Chloe. Courage isn't acting on impulse, it's knowing when to wait. If you love me, be brave now." She bit her lip but nodded. "Damien." Her voice was barely a whisper as he shut the wardrobe door. The heavy door to the room creaked open further, and a mocking voice filled the space. Well, well. Look who we have here. If it isn't my oh-so-wonderful cousin." Damien turned, his expression unreadable. "You've finally shown up, Johannes." A smirk played on Johannes' lips. "I've missed you." "You've finally shown up, Johannes. You vanished without a trace. I thought you were dead." Damien's voice was calm, giving nothing away. "I've missed you." "You missed me?" Johannes scoffed, his anger rising. Without hesitation, he fired. The bullet struck Damien's arm. My. After all this time, this is how you greet me? Damien chuckled, gripping his bleeding arm. Johannes gestured to one of his men, who stepped forward and forced Damien to his knees. Look at you, Johannes sneered. The invincible Duke Thisse, kneeling at my feet. A shame I'm the only one who gets to witness it. He strode forward, pressing his gun under Damien's chin, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. Where's the woman? I'd like to thank her for leading you here. Damien remained unfazed. While you were busy shooting at me, I hid her somewhere safe. I'm quite the considerate husband, you know. His voice was almost teasing. Johannes' expression darkened. Even covered in blood, you boast. His grip tightened on the gun. You've sunk lower than I ever imagined by marrying that worthless woman. His voice rose in fury as he struck Damien with each word. Inside the wardrobe, Chloe flinched at the sound of the blows. She reached for the door, but Sophie grasped her hand, shaking her head despite the tears in her eyes. Damien's words echoed in Chloe's mind. Courage isn't about reckless action. It's about knowing when to hold back. If you love me, be brave for me. Her eyes filled with tears as she held Sophie close. Johannes finally stepped back, breath unsteady. He swallowed his rage and clicked his tongue. Take him away. Damien was dragged from the room, his blood trailing behind him. Silence settled. After some time, Chloe slowly pushed the wardrobe door open. Sophie peeked outside. I think they're gone, Miss Claire, she whispered. They stepped out of their hiding place. Sophie gasped, clutching Chloe's dress. That's blood. What happened to Mr. Taylor? Her voice trembled. Chloe's breath hitched. Her hands curled into fists. Damien surrendered. To protect Sophie and me, her chest tightened. I've become his weakness. And now he's bleeding, captured. Even if the shots weren't fatal, will he survive? Her mind raced. What should I do? Sophie pointed to the ground. Miss Claire, look at that writing. Chloe crouched, tracing hurried. Familiar handwriting scratched into the dirt. Expect a gift. My love. Tears welled in her eyes as a memory surfaced. Damien's voice, firm and unwavering. Chloe, if anyone dares mock you, I swear on the Thisse name, I'll sever their head and present it to you. Damien. Her fingers tightened around her necklace as she trembled. That night, Chloe and Sophie returned home late. Sophie. Oh, my baby. Miss Stella's desperate cry filled the air. Sophie sobbed. Mama. Mama. Her mother scooped her up, holding her tightly. I thought I'd lost you. I heard gunshots, and you were gone. I was sick with worry. Chloe watched them, her heart heavy, but before she could speak, Mr. Ricardo approached, clutching a newspaper. His expression was grim. I found this at the neighbor's house while searching for Sophie. He hesitated, then handed it to her. What exactly is going on? Chloe exhaled slowly. There was no time to explain everything. I'll tell you later, Mr. Ricardo. Right now, I need the fastest means of transportation. So suddenly. Ricardo stammered. Where are you going? Chloe's mind worked fast. The fugitive Prince of Swanton is in the duchy. He must have had help. Someone powerful. Someone who hates Swanton as much as he does. Her eyes hardened with resolve. I need to get to the capital. To the royal palace, she said firmly. I must meet their king, immediately. Chloe sat quietly in the train, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape as she headed for the palace of the Duchy of Carter. Our sincerest apologies, Your Majesty, for our tardiness. Lord Weiss said as he stepped into her cabin, his expression tense. Count Cromier followed closely behind. I see you're here as well, Count Cromier. Chloe's eyes flickered to them before returning to the window. With both of you present, I assume Damien anticipated this situation to some extent. Lord Weiss gave a solemn nod. Yes. His Majesty is meticulous. If things take a turn for the worse, we are prepared to escort you back to Swanton. Right, Chloe interrupted, her voice firm. And because of just how meticulous he is, he would never allow his life to end so pitifully in a foreign land. Together, we will save him. The sun cannot set this soon in Swanton. Lord Weiss and Count Cromier exchanged glances, momentarily stunned by her conviction. She straightened her posture. As Queen of Swanton and acting monarch, I intend to meet the King of Carter. By nightfall, Chloe arrived at the palace. She sat in the waiting room, a steaming cup of tea placed before her. The scent lingered in the air, but she made no move to drink it. "Ah, I see we have a very esteemed guest. What brings you here at such an hour?" The King of Carter's voice drew her attention as he entered the room. Chloe rose gracefully, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "It's been a while. I believe this is the first time we are meeting under such formal circumstances." The king chuckled. "That's odd. Have we ever met informally? Ah, was it that evening?" His smirk deepened as he strolled past her. "Well, in any case, welcome to the Duchy of Carter." She remained unfazed. "Thank you." "No need for that," he said, settling into his seat as a maid poured his tea. "Now, tell me, what's so urgent that you had to interrupt my honeymoon?" Chloe took a slow breath before delivering her demand. "Tell me the whereabouts of Johannes. That traitor." The king tilted his head, amusement glinting in his eyes. "A traitor, you say? Isn't the real traitor someone else? Someone with a much darker heart, someone who betrayed his own cousin and took his place?" Chloe didn't waver. "You seem to be misinformed. A true traitor is someone who, during a plague that devastated an entire nation, fled to save only himself. That's what I call a traitor, not someone who calmed the angry populace through fair negotiations and rightfully succeeded the throne." The king hummed, considering her words. "While that may be true. Johannes attacked His Majesty and me while we were in Genevois," she pressed on. "He is now in hiding, holding His Majesty captive." The king took a sip of his tea, unhurried. "You must be very worried. Even if Johannes harms him, he won't be able to return to Swanton and reclaim the throne." "And why not?" she challenged. "Because someone with the same spirit as Damien will rise and dethrone him too." The king leaned forward slightly, still smirking. "And who might that be?" Chloe met his gaze, unwavering. "It could be anyone. House Thisse believes the most capable person should rule, regardless of status, gender, or physical limitations. And normalizing trade with Swanton wouldn't be bad for the duchy. Even if Johannes does ascend the throne, he will be forced to abdicate. If relations between our countries deteriorate, it's the people who will suffer." The king exhaled slowly, the weight of her words settling in his thoughts. He knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Then, with a dramatic sigh, he leaned back. "I see. I acknowledge the validity of your argument. But I'm afraid I cannot answer your question regarding Johannes's whereabouts." His lips curled into a knowing smile. "Since you've come all this way, why not enjoy some tea before you go? Though, it seems the refined lady of Swanton didn't find the first cup to her taste and let it go cold." Chloe's fingers tightened slightly. "I thought you understood. Is there a need for you to protect Johannes?" The king tilted his head, feigning surprise. "This is beginning to feel like an interrogation. Perhaps you don't fully understand, so I'll be delicate. Simply put, the people of Swanton are insufferable." Chloe felt frustration twist in her stomach. "No matter what I say, I can't convince him a different approach was needed. Should I get on my knees and beg? Would that even work?" Then, it struck her. A memory, Damien, kneeling before her, his hand holding hers. "No, don't do that, Chloe. A queen kneeling? That's absurd. Don't be hasty. Find his weakness and slowly tighten the noose." His voice was calm, his lips brushing her fingers. His weakness. Chloe's mind snapped back to the present. Her gaze locked onto the king's with renewed determination. "Alice," she said firmly, "I'd like to see my sister." For the first time that night, the king's smirk faltered. Chloe remained calm, her voice steady as she met the king's gaze. "Let me see her. As a daughter of House Verdier, I want to see my sister." The king's expression darkened. "You must be mistaken. She chose me over her entire family. Why would I allow her to meet with someone who no longer matters?" Before Chloe could respond, the door swung open. "Arnor." Alice stepped into the room, her face flushed with anger. Arnor clutched his head in frustration. "I thought I told you to lock the door," he snapped, addressing the maid standing behind Alice, looking tense. "About that, Your Highness." She broke out herself, the maid stuttered. Alice's voice cut through the room. "Don't blame her. I broke out myself." Arnor walked up to her, taking her hand. "Alice, you were sleeping so soundly. I didn't want to wake you. A teasing lilt entered his voice. Should I have made sure you couldn't get out of bed at all? Shut up and get lost, Alice demanded. He chuckled, unfazed. Ah, my lady has such a sharp tongue. Perhaps I should purify it with a kiss. I want to talk to my sister alone, Alice said quickly, her face betraying a flush of embarrassment despite her anger. The king sighed dramatically. You break my heart. Can't you ask nicely? She gritted her teeth. Please, Arnor. With a dismissive wave, he relented. Fine. Have your little chat. He stepped aside, and Alice rushed forward, sitting down beside Chloe as they were finally alone. I'm so sorry, Chloe, Alice whispered. I didn't want you to see me like this. Chloe cupped her sister's face gently. Smile, Alice. Alice blinked, then chuckled, brushing away unshed tears. Ah, right. So anyway, you've no idea how shocked I was when I heard you were here. What's going on? Chloe inhaled deeply. Alice, do you remember when you promised you'd help me one day? Alice nodded without hesitation. Of course, I do. I'm a queen, you know. Chloe clasped her sister's hands. Then, for the first and last time, I need to ask for your help. Please, save my husband. No, I'll save him myself, but I need your help finding him. Alice gasped. Chloe. Chloe's voice trembled, but she held firm. Alice, he once told me, you may wish for happiness for those you love, but don't you know that the people you love wish for your happiness too? She swallowed, her eyes glistening. Could you show me that I can trust in his words? Alice, please, she pleaded, bowing her head as memories of Damien flooded her mind. Tears fell onto her clenched hands. I love him, Alice. As much as I love my own life. No, I think I love him even more than that. Please, help me save him. Alice reached for Chloe's hands, holding them gently. Chloe, did you know the only reason I've gotten away with living so recklessly is because you've always been there for me? She lifted Chloe's face, wiping her tears away. So you have no idea how happy I am that you're asking me for help. No matter what, I'll do everything I can to find him. Just hang in there a little longer. Chloe exhaled shakily, nodding. Thank you, Alice. Later, alone in her chamber, Chloe sat with her hands clenched, her gaze lowered as though in prayer. A familiar warmth settled over her, and she felt it, his presence. A gentle touch on her shoulder. Chloe, my love, you did well. Her breath hitched. Damien, why do I always realize the most important things when it's too late? His voice echoed in her memory, strong and unwavering. It's all right. It's never too late. You still have plenty of chances. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Do I? I don't even know where you are right now. But, you defied even my death. I wanted to repay you for everything, so I suppose this, too, should be repaid. Chloe whispered into the quiet night, her heart aching as his presence faded. Damien, I can't be apart from you. In the carriage, Chloe watched Damien, his eyes shut, arms folded, as if lost in thought. Damien, please wake up, Your Grace, she said softly, but he remained still. Frowning, she shifted closer, pulling out a book. From the corner of his eye, he watched her but said nothing as the carriage swayed gently. She reached out, lightly touching his face, searching for any sign of movement. Still, he didn't respond. Growing desperate, she took the royal seal from his desk and pressed it lightly against his cheek. Just as she was about to pull away, a deep voice broke through the silence. What are you doing? Chloe gasped as Damien's eyes fluttered open. Ah, wiry awake. You wouldn't wake up, Your Grace. And so, I just wanted to see if the stamp really looked like you, she stammered, her face burning. He wordlessly took the seal from her hand and pressed it against her forehead instead. You're even prettier in person, he mused with a chuckle, pulling her closer. Chloe's face turned scarlet. She turned away, feigning irritation. This isn't the time for this, Damien. And why not? Do you not like me? His voice was low, teasing. Damien, she said, reaching for his face. Now's not the time. Darkness. Damien jolted awake, his body aching. He tried to move, but thick iron shackles bound his wrists, chaining him to a rock. Dim candlelight flickered against the cave walls, illuminating occult symbols scrawled across the ground. Books and ritual tools lay scattered around him. He exhaled sharply. Damn it. Johannes sneered as he stepped closer, amusement flickering in his eyes. My, oh my, to see the mighty Thisse trembling in fear. Quite the sight. Damien slowly lifted his head, unbothered. What? Now that you're staring death in the face, do you feel like wetting yourself? Johannes taunted, his voice laced with anger. Please keep your distance, Your Majesty, his guard stammered beside him. Johannes's irritation flared. Say something, he snapped. Damien shifted slightly, and Johannes flinched, betraying a hint of fear. A slow breath escaped Damien's lips before he finally spoke, his tone dripping with mockery. What's wrong, Johannes? You look like you're the one about to wet yourself. Johannes's expression darkened. He had expected Damien to be broken by now, yet he remained as unshaken as ever. Are you all right? Damien continued, smirking. You do realize how ridiculous you look, trying to act so composed while I'm sitting here half naked and chained. Johannes scoffed. Perhaps I should have stripped you completely, then. Damien chuckled. If that was your plan, you should have been more thorough. Johannes's fury spiked. Snatching the dagger from his belt, he stepped forward, his expression twisted with frustration. There's not a single thing you can best me at, Damien said, his voice calm. That's the truth, whether you admit it or not. Johannes's grip tightened on the knife. His rage burned as he suddenly plunged the blade downward, just below Damien's waist. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. My dear cousin, must I cut off your pride-filled manhood just to shut you up? He smirked, watching Damien closely. Damien smirked. You're still so naive, Johannes. You should start with the heart. Why dirty your hands down there? He jested. Johannes let out a tensed smile. All right, Damien. I'll rip out your heart and crush it in my fist, just as you want. I'll even write my name with your blood. Then, I'll shred away at your oh-so-perfect body, over and over again, he said coldly. Damien watched him with an unmoved gaze. Who taught you such a foolish ritual? Do you think doing that will make you a king? He asked, his voice sending shivers to Johannes. He clenched the knife in his hand tightly, his look confused. No, I'm far more successful and remarkable than you. He glared at Damien, his rage barely contained. A man consumed by power and glory, overshadowed me. You interfered with everything I did until I lost my rightful place because of you. Damien, restrained but unfazed, let out a dry chuckle. How pathetic, he said, his piercing gaze locked onto Johannes. Are you truly blaming your own failures and mental distress on me? Shut up. Johannes snapped, his body trembling with fury. Damien exhaled slowly, his voice calm yet cutting. Even without me, you wouldn't have been able to keep the throne, Johannes. Well, I'll admit it, you had your moment of glory. But you know what? No matter how much something shines, not everything that glitters is gold. Johannes' face contorted with rage. His breath came in ragged gasps, his mind clouded with frustration. His hand trembled, his voice a desperate scream. Why you demon? Begone. Die, he asked, attempting to plunge the knife into Damien, but he had undid one of his chains, grabbing the knife from Johannes before stabbing him instead. The ropes that had bound Damien lay in shreds. Blood dripped from his fingers, he had broken them to slip free. Johannes' eyes widened in horror. This can't be, he thought as he slumped to the floor. Damien turned to one of Johannes' men, his voice steady despite the pain. You there. Hand me the gun, and I'll spare your life. The guard hesitated, his grip tightening on the weapon. His loyalty wavered, but he shook his head. I cannot do that. Damien sighed, tilting his head slightly. Is that so? How unfortunate, he said before tossing the knife quickly, stabbing him, which sent him to the floor as the gun fell to the ground. Damien picked up the gun as the guard looked scared, trembling as he begged Damien for his life. Damien didn't hesitate before pulling the trigger. Damien went on to shoot the shackles on his remaining arm and on one of his leg, setting himself almost free before realizing the bullet was finished. Just then an explosion was hit from nearby. Was that an explosion? He wondered. Just then, Johannes got up from the floor. A wicked grin spread across his face as he staggered backward. He looked at the crumbling ceiling and let out a breathless laugh. Damien, die there, just like that. Johannes shouted, his voice laced with triumph. Don't you have the courage to face me until the end? Damien sapped as he watched him rise to his feet. You know just as well as I do what the wise decision is here. Johannes sneered. Serves you right. I'll come back and personally take care of your corpse once it's been crushed under these rocks. He turned on his heel, disappearing into the darkness. Damien wore a perplexed look, not minding the falling rubble around him. Meanwhile, outside the cavern, Chloe's heart pounded in her chest as she rode through the woods with some soldiers. Are you all right, Your Majesty? Her knight shouted. I'm fine. Chloe yelled over the roaring wind. Don't slow down. Her hands clenched the reins tightly, her eyes burning with desperation. Please. Damien, please be safe. She muttered inwardly. Chloe recalled her conversation with Alice the previous night. Mount Trilobite, Alice had said. There's an old temple at the top. That's where Johannes is hiding. Unfortunately, that's all the information I could find. I'm sorry, Chloe. Now, standing before the temple ruins engulfed in flames, Chloe's heart pounded. The once sturdy structure crumbled under the fire's relentless grasp, ash swirling around her, stinging her eyes. What happened here? She murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped closer to the burning altar, coughing as smoke filled her lungs. Amid the chaos, her eyes landed on a map, a location marked on it. Count Chromia hesitated before stepping forward. Your Majesty, it seems His Majesty isn't here. We should leave before the fire spreads. Chloe picked up the map, her grip tightening. No. Damien is here. Your Majesty. Where are you going? Chromia called, panic rising as she ran from the burning temple. Ignoring their desperate shouts, she pushed forward, her gown whipping around her as she rushed toward the exit. Your Majesty. Please stop. The fire is spreading quickly. I must get you to safety. Chromia called after her as she ran into the woods, heading toward a section of the mountain engulfed in flames. I know Damien is here, she shouted. She came to an abrupt halt at the edge of a cliff. Below, she spotted a burning cave. Just then, a gust of wind tore the map from her grasp, carrying it into the abyss. Chloe trembled, her mind racing. Damien, despite knowing that nothing lasts forever, I still held on to my pride, never treating each moment with you as if it could be our last. She sank to her knees, her tears dripping onto her hand. There are still so many things I need to tell you. A painful realization struck her. The Chloe Verdier I once was is gone. She let out a choked laugh, her tears mixing with soot. Never again can I be the same. So, Damien, you must take responsibility for me forevermore. Throwing her head back, she screamed into the flames. Damien, I'm waiting for you. Even if it takes forever. Deep within the ruins, Damien lay motionless beneath fallen beams, his body battered, his breathing shallow. The unbearable heat closed in around him, yet his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Is this really the end? What a miserable way to die. He thought of Chloe, her fierce spirit, her unwavering resolve, the way she looked at him as if he were the only man in the world. If Chromia and Weiss have any sense, they won't let Chloe see my corpse. A weak chuckle escaped his lips. Ah, my love, let me leave this world with a smile. Then, a voice, raw with desperation, rang through the inferno. I'm waiting for you. Even if it means forever. His eyes fluttered open. Chloe. With the last of his strength, Damien shifted his gaze upward, barely seeing the light filtering through the smoke. Faintly, he heard his name being called. A faint smile touched his lips as he whispered, How could I possibly die, when you're here, waiting for me? Ignoring his injuries, he forced himself forward, his chained leg dragging beneath him. Above, at the cliff's edge, Chloe still called his name, desperation rising in her voice. She took a step forward, but Chromia caught her arm. Your Majesty, it's too dangerous. We must leave. Let go, she snapped, struggling against his grip. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed beside the edge, her hands trembling. Damien. He's not dead. He can't be. Her fingers ghosted over her lips as she whispered his name again. Duke Thisse. He wouldn't die like this. A deep chuckle cut through her despair. You're right. She froze. He's not dead. Chloe gasped, her head snapping up. Damien stood before her, bruised but very much alive. She barely had time to react before rushing toward him, throwing her arms around his injured frame. He staggered but held her just as tightly. She trembled in his embrace, the scent of smoke and blood clinging to him. "Chloe, I'm here. It's over now," he murmured. She clung to him, pressing her forehead against his chest. "Don't ever make me wait like that again," she whispered. Despite the rain falling, the couple remained in their embrace. Damien chuckled, his voice hoarse yet filled with warmth. "You were yelling so loudly that you could probably be heard all the way in Swanton, haha." Chloe let out a shaky breath, her eyes searching his face. It's really you, isn't it?" He smirked as he brushed her hair. "Did you truly think your husband just died on you?" Her chest tightened at his teasing words, and a sob caught in her throat. "No. I prayed and could never sleep, ever since the first time I saw you." Her voice cracked as she recalled all the sleepless nights, the endless worries that had consumed her since the moment she met him. "And when you broke my cane in the forest, I hated you so much. Yet, my heart still raced, and I hated that even more." Damien's expression softened. He reached up, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "I see, my love," he murmured. She bit her lip before whispering, "But still, I married you. If I hated you so much, I would have run away." Damien's smirk returned. Yes. However, even if you had run away, you would have come to love me in the end. Isn't that right?" Chloe's cheeks turned red. She held his face before leaning in as they kissed. From a distance, Weiss and Chromia watched the couple. "Are you thinking the same as I am right now?" Weiss asked. "Perhaps, but how can we ever understand why they do what they do?" Count Chromia replied with a smile. "Indeed, but must they do that on the edge of a cliff?" Weiss replied. Soon, they were settled in a carriage, the sky now clear as they rode gently through the woods. Inside the carriage, Chloe attended to Damien's wound. Chloe examined his cheerful look. "Why are you laughing?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I just can't help it," he said as she bandaged his arm. "People will think you've gone mad," she mused. "Well, for good reason. I've just come back from the brink of death." Damien smirked again, lifting his bandaged hand. "Do I really need to keep this splint on my hand?" "You suppose." Chloe gave him a sharp look. "Do you really find this funny? How could you even think of breaking your own finger?" Damien winced as she prodded his hand. "Chloe, you truly are, oh. It hurts when you do that." "Of course it hurts," she huffed. "We'll also need to check your ankle again when we get back." "You're acting as if I'm the reckless one," Damien muttered. "You are," Chloe shot back. "How could you even think of climbing up those rocks in this state?" He kissed her forehead, causing her cheeks to flush. "Well, if I hadn't, I wouldn't be able to kiss you like this right now." Chloe's breath hitched as he leaned closer, but before their lips could meet, he suddenly turned his head, his gaze darkening. "Chloe, look at that pitiful sight," he said, nodding toward Johannes in the distance. His expression twisted in distaste. "I hope no one finds out he's my cousin." Damien grabbed a gun with his hurt arm. "This won't be easy," he murmured. "Are you all right?" she asked, looking unsure. "I need to kill Johannes, but this splint isn't allowing me to aim properly," he told her. Chloe gazed out the carriage as she watched Johannes running as fast as possible. "Johannes, you almost made me lose Damien forever," she thought. "Give it here," she said, surprising Damien. He handed her the gun. She held the rifle as she took aim. "No need to rush, Chloe. Just focus on the target and hold your breath," he tutored as he whispered in her ear, causing her heart to beat faster. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as she listened to his low, calming voice. "Don't allow yourself to tense up," he continued. "Don't feel pressured to shoot. If it's too much for you, just help me with my splint." Before he could finish, Chloe released the bolt. The sound of impact echoed in the air. From the coach section, Chromia and Weiss turned back, looking confused. "What was that?" they asked. A stunned silence followed before Damien smiled. "Bullseye. That was amazing, Your Majesty," another shouted in awe. Damien blinked in shock, then let out a breathless laugh. "Is this your way of showing your never-ending love for me?" Chloe stood still. Her breath came in short gasps. "Did I just..." I just killed, she said before fainting. Damien held her gently. Chloe, he said firmly, trying to call her back from her faint. His face softened as he observed her closely. I love you, Chloe. I love you with all my heart, he said, clutching her closer. 3 years ago, Birch Castle. The grand hall of Birch Castle was dimly lit by the warm glow of a roaring fire, casting flickering shadows across the lavishly decorated walls. Outside, the winter wind howled, rattling the stained glass windows. Inside, a tense discussion unfolded. You can't delay any longer, Your Grace, Count Weiss urged, his hands clutching onto the snooker stick as he awaited his turn. Duke Damien Thisse sighed, leaning back lazily as he studied the challenge before him. Just give me a bit more time. You've already won 2 games in a row, Your Grace. That's not what we're talking about right now, Weiss snapped. Then what are we talking about? Cromia said, smiling as he rested his hand on Weiss' shoulder. Cromia exchanged glances with Weiss before replying, It seems Count Weiss is worried about your marriage being delayed. Damien let out a slow breath, feigning boredom as he hit the cue ball. My marriage, her. But he's right. Considering the prestige of your name, there isn't a single noble family who wouldn't want to marry into House Thisse. So why do you keep holding off? Cromia asked, looking shocked. Damien wiped his stick. Think about it. Could you marry someone you don't even wish to kiss? Could you marry just anyone? He asked, gently wiping his stick. Weiss burst into laughter. Wow. Your Grace, I didn't know you were such a romantic. We really had no idea, Cromia said in agreement as they both laughed. A romantic? Damien arched a brow. If I'm going to lay with a woman and produce an heir, I'll need to at least like her. Well, of course. Weiss agreed. You can't share a bed with someone you don't love. So to me, that sounds very romantic, Cromia added with a wink. You're very persistent, Weiss. Damien waved a hand dismissively. Enough with the love talk. I have my reasons. Weiss sighed. Yes, I'm sure you do. Because someone is clearly on your mind, he thought. During the war, Damien laughed loudly with Weiss by his side, not minding the fighting around. Damien's smirk deepened as he exhaled a quiet laugh. Ha! Weiss, you should have seen it. Do you know what sort of expression she wore as she stood in that forest? Her broken cane at her feet, talking about the dignity of nobles. Take cover. Weiss shouted, running to him. Damien suddenly declared in a mocking tone, mimicking a panicked soldier. She spat words of encouragement for me to win the war as if she were some ruthless debt collector. Please, Your Grace, Weiss pleaded as he held Damien, trying to force him for them both to duck to avoid incoming mortars. Damien wasn't finished. And that look on her face when she said being confined to that barn-sized estate for the rest of her life would be pure happiness. Ha! How daring she was, Weiss. He laughed. Months after the war, in his study, Weiss came with a report. Weiss paled slightly as his eyes fell on the stack of documents resting beside Damien's chair. Your Grace, these documents, are you trying to ruin Viscount Verdier's daughter? Damien's sharp gaze met his. Not at all. Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm trying to have her, he said as he whirled his whiskey. Weiss stiffened. And, you plan to marry her? Damien gave a slow nod. Yes, Weiss. Weiss swallowed hard. If you fell for her at first sight, why not just propose? Why do all of this? Damien's lips curled into a smirk as he dropped his glass on the table. Who said I fell for anyone? He leaned forward, his golden eyes glinting in the firelight. Chloe Verdier is the most suitable match for me right now, which is why I made this decision. Weiss hesitated before whispering, Does this mean you plan to bankrupt her family? Damien's smirk didn't waver. Viscount Verdier's investment failure is his own responsibility. No one forced him to do anything. Isn't that right? Weiss looked tensed. God gave him everything, except decency. But perhaps God had his reasons, he thought. 3 months after leaving Castle Rose, Damien played snooker with Weiss and Cromia. Silence fell over the room, only the crackling fire breaking it. Finally, Cromia cleared his throat. Time really flies, doesn't it? It's already been 3 months since the soiree at Castle Rose. Weiss nodded. Yes. It's already been 3 months. Has there been any word from House Verdier? Chromia asked. Damien waved him off. Get a clue, Chromia. No need to concern yourself with my betrothal. Before the season changes, you'll both hear about my wedding. Weiss grinned. Oh? Any family would feel honored to marry their daughter to you, Your Grace. Indeed. Damien said, hitting the ball calmly, his thoughts shifting to Chloe's smile. He looked lost before hitting his ball carelessly, missing his target. Weiss blinked. He. You've lost again, Your Grace. Damien froze as he pictured Chloe standing before him. He gripped his stick hard. Damien smiled. No. I never lose, Chloe Verdier, he thought. He abruptly tossed his stick to Weiss, who caught it quickly. I'm going hunting to clear my head. Weiss and Chromia exchanged wary glances. As for the hunting grounds, yes, the Verdier estate will do. Weiss looked dumbfounded. Your Grace, this isn't something you can force. Damien smirked. You ought to sit this hunt out, Weiss. You'll likely just be a distraction. Weiss sighed in exasperation. But, Your Grace. Damien waved a hand, already walking away. Oh, and since the food there probably lacks any taste, order the freshest and highest quality ingredients from the kingdom. As you know, I'm quite picky about my food. With that, the Duke exited the room, his mind already set. His game had just begun. The next morning, Damien dressed for the hunt. Weiss stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Are you really going like that? Damien smirked as he straightened his collar. Why not? Is there a problem? Weiss hesitated, glancing over the opulent attire. It's just, you look like a peacock trying to impress someone. They rode in silence, Damien leading the way. Weiss's words from earlier echoed in his mind. Your Grace, are you truly proposing to Lady Verdier with all your love and sincerity? At that, Damien had only smiled. Love? That's ridiculous. Can such a fleeting feeling even compare? I've shown great mercy, yet she ignored me for 3 months. That wasn't like her. His brows furrowed in thought. Chloe Verdier knows how to separate personal feelings from duty. That look in her eyes when she spoke of noble obligations wasn't a lie. She wouldn't ignore me out of pettiness. Then, a pause. A realization, unless my judgment was wrong. What if she truly doesn't like me? His grip tightened on the reins. A laugh, low and amused, escaped him. But what of it? From the moment he met her, he had considered every outcome. And in none of them had she rejected him. Everything I've built, everything I will achieve, I will place in her hands. The crowd erupted in cheers. Long live the king. Long live the queen. Long live House Thisse. Chloe stood at the heart of it all, white lilies trembling in her grasp. The weight of countless gazes bore down on her, but she focused on only one, Damien. He reached for her hand, his grip firm yet steady. Are you nervous? His voice was softer than usual. She swallowed and nodded. I won't lie and say I'm not. He smirked and, without warning, lifted her into his arms. She gasped, her face burning as she covered it with her hands. Raise your head, Chloe, he murmured. Look around. See all that's in your hands. Her breath hitched. She finally did. The grand hall, the people, the kingdom, everything. Yet, amidst it all, her gaze returned to Damien. Chloe, he whispered. Her lips parted, her voice barely above a breath. Me too. Damien stilled. I love you too, she said again, this time with certainty. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. Do you have any idea how much of a mess you look right now? He teased. Tears streaking down your cheeks. Chloe let out a watery laugh. That's okay. What is? She met his gaze, warmth settling in her chest. That you see me, even when I'm a mess. And as Damien pulled her into his arms, the world faded away, leaving only the two of them, bound by love, pride, and destiny, as they kissed. Chloe sat by the large window, sunlight filtering through as she unfolded the letter in her hands. The familiar handwriting made her smile before she even began reading. It was from Alice. To my beloved sister, Chloe, when I saw your coronation photo in the newspaper, I couldn't help but laugh. A king showing such open affection for his wife. It's probably a first for Swanton royalty. Anyway, even though we're family, some things need to be said. I hope you'll forgive us for everything you and your husband went through in our duchy. Knowing Arnor, it's hard to say if he'll ever apologize properly, but please know he feels just as responsible. And Chloe, even though we fight fire with fire, Arnor and I can't bear to be apart. So don't worry too much about me. Oh, and by the way, Father arrived not too long ago. He says he'll spend his remaining years enjoying time with his grandchildren. It's nice that he no longer speaks of joining Mother. I also visited Genevois a few days ago. Just as you said, Gilles has become a wonderful missionary. He always wished for our family's happiness, so I'm glad he's found happiness of his own. There's so much more I want to write, but Arnor keeps calling for me. I promise I'll write again soon. Chloe. Love, Alice, who's slowly but surely growing up. Chloe exhaled softly, pressing the letter to her heart. It was comforting to know her family was doing well, that the wounds of the past were healing. She was lost in thought when a voice called out to her, startling her. Chloe, dear. Come quickly. She turned to see Damien's mother settling into a chair with a sigh. Oh? Are you returning to Thisse today? Chloe asked. Yes. Damien worries far too much about Thisse Castle, her mother-in-law admitted, shaking her head. He says no one can manage it properly without me. She chuckled. That boy can be so fussy, don't you think? Before Chloe could answer, she reached forward, placing an earring in Chloe's hand. Chloe hesitated. I really don't need more gifts. You've already given me so many beautiful jewels. Goodness, you're too frugal, her mother-in-law chided, looking displeased. You need to maintain appearances. Your sister wears gems of all kinds. Aren't you the least bit envious? Swanton is certainly not lacking in wealth, and the king is more than capable. She sighed. And with such a brilliant and beautiful queen, I truly don't understand it. Chloe only smiled at the remark. Her mother-in-law turned to the maids carrying her suitcases. No need to see me off, Your Majesty, she said. But perhaps I could visit Thisse Castle and help you, Chloe suggested hesitantly. Her mother-in-law chuckled. Oh, Chloe, you really know how to trouble me. Chloe stiffened. My apologies. There's no need to apologize, she said, cupping Chloe's face. You're my daughter now. It's natural for children to worry about their parents. I'm sure your mother and father would say the same. Chloe's gaze turned misty. A servant stepped forward with a heavy coat. Please wear this, at least, Chloe urged with a small smile. Thisse is cold, even in the summer. Her mother-in-law beamed. Honestly, this girl. Just then, Damien appeared behind Chloe, wrapping his arms around her. My, I'm starting to feel a bit jealous, his mother mused. Damien smirked. I don't think I received such a warm farewell, even when I went off to war. If you two are going to be like this, he added, perhaps you should take Chloe with you, mother. His mother laughed. Now, I wouldn't want His Majesty to be too distracted from his duties. I shall go alone. Chloe turned to Damien, frowning. How can you speak to your mother that way? What did I do? Damien asked, feigning innocence. His mother simply watched them with a smile before finally departing. That evening, Chloe took a walk with Damien in the garden. It feels like everyone is being too formal around me these days, even your mother, she admitted. Damien gave a small shrug. It's only natural. You're the queen. You're also the head of this castle. No, I'm not. Technically, you are, she pointed out. A slow smirk spread across his face. Oh? Didn't I tell you? Castle Rose is yours, Chloe. I've dedicated it to you. Chloe's breath caught. What do you mean? When did this happen? Well, on paper, when you left me for a time, Damien said. But I'd already decided much sooner than that. Her heart raced. Aren't you curious to know exactly when? She swallowed, but deep down, she already knew. I think I do. Damien arched a brow, his gaze full of challenge. Oh, really? Then when? Chloe exhaled slowly. Wasn't it when you first invited me to the soirée held here? A shadow of a smile ghosted his lips. Then do you also know what I wanted to do in this very spot? He asked, stepping closer. A flush crept up Chloe's neck. I think I do now. Damien knelt before her. Well then, Chloe, he said, watching as her face turned red. She swallowed. Go on. He smirked. "Help me shed all of my dignity." They smiled at each other, their love steady and certain. Not long after, Chloe gave birth to twins, a son and a daughter. Damien adored his family, and as the years passed, the struggles that had once stood between them faded into memories.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible adventure. If you enjoyed what you watched, please consider liking, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell. Your comments mean the world to us and help us improve. The next episode promises even more excitement and unexpected twists, so stay tuned as we embark on this thrilling journey together. Keep the anticipation alive, and we'll catch you in the next episode.